This is Main Street with Gary Allen. Now, here's Gary.
And hello, everybody, and happy 2025. I hope so far these first few days of the new year have been good to you. They're very good to me so far. And let's hope that all of 2025 is a tremendous success for all of you and all of us out here with good health and happiness throughout the year. Again, this is our very first show of the new year. We took some weeks off to get a little bit of rest and vacation, watch a little football. I took off a little bit more than that. As you know, the guys were on with some special guest, some guy from the North Pole, from what I understand. At any particular rate, I want to thank the Japanese Gardens for their continued support of this particular program. And starting very soon, I will be putting out on Facebook where you can watch this show on DBTV and all the different platforms that are on there. There's so many that if we listed them, we'd run out of areas to put them in. And it's just an exciting time, and some other things are happening too. And so I'm excited to pass that along as we continue to move forward. My guest for today is someone who's been on this program before. He's one of my dearest friends in the whole world. He is a walking encyclopedia of show business knowledge. If he doesn't know about it, it doesn't exist. He's an Emmy Award winner, a Golden Globe nominee. He is an actor, a comedian, a producer, an author, and as I said, a historian. He also does a podcast every week called the Geoffrey Mark Plays Ella. He's written a number of books, the Lucy book, the biography of Ella Fitzgerald, one of the greatest singers to ever come along. And in the next couple of months, Geoffrey will be back on again to talk about Ella, with Black History Month being in February. Jazz Month, I think, is sometime after that. But we're going to get Geoffrey back to talk about Ella Fitzgerald and some other jazz music as well. So we're excited about that. We're going to talk about his podcast, and we're going to talk about how he puts that together today. And he'll tell you exactly where you can catch up with him on that podcast. So would you welcome the incomparable, the super talented, multi-talented genius behind everything that is Geoffrey Mark. Geoffrey Mark.
It's Main Street with Gary Allen and Marty Manfred, the Wonder Dog. Hi. For those of you who are not baby boomers, there was a wonderful children's cartoon that used to appear on Captain Kangaroo, which was a children's show we watched for 30 years. And Terry Toons presents, and it was an adventures of this little boy who had this funnel hat that could make himself into anything. And the billing was, and Marty Manfred, the Wonder Dog. And of course, the dog never did anything but lie there and complain. So I wanted to make Gary laugh.
I remember that. Mr. Green Jeans, Mr. Moose, Bunny Rabbit. Oh my God, that takes you back. And here's the question for everybody out there. You know the answer. I know the answer. Who was the original Clarabelle?
Tick, 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 ding. Well, the answer, of course, is Bob Keeshan, Captain Kangaroo.
Yep, exactly. That was the original Clarabelle on the Howdy Doody show. So it was always a lot of fun. And you know, I remember that day that Howdy Doody signed off, and Clarabelle came right up close to the camera and looked into the camera and went, "Bye bye." I wept, I betcha, for hours.
I have a really clean video of that show.
Oh.
And every time I watch it, in color, every time I watch it, tears.
Yep. It just, because every kid thought back then that show was specifically for them. They didn't imagine that kids in the neighborhood were watching it just for them. And with my crazy imagination, but when Clarabelle did that, I lost it. And even my aunt, who was raising me, said, "What are you crying about?" And a friend of mine said, "Well, Clarabelle just said goodbye, and Gary just lost it." And I was like,
we have to give our friends out there a little history here, because off camera, before we came on the air, we were talking about we're at a certain age where we don't necessarily recognize the new, youngest, hottest people in show business. Well, if you're younger than we are, you may not know what we're talking about. Really and truly, the very first children's show on television was called Howdy Doody. Its original name was Puppet Playhouse, and it debuted all the way back in 1947. And the show really opened up the NBC television network. It was the first program broadcast in color on a regular basis, and it ran from 47 till 1960. So all our baby boomers grew up with this thing. And then the man, Bob Smith, who called himself Buffalo Bob, and it was puppets, marionettes and cartoons and children's games and a clown. And you had kids in the audience there, usually getting so excited they were urinating in their pants. And in the 1970s, there was a revival, and this same person toured all the college campuses, made a fortune.
Yeah.
And it really is a shame that Bob Smith does not have a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame, but
yeah,
it's happened.
It's like watching the casinos being demolished in Las Vegas, out with the old and in with the new. You know,
we can't help. You know, we all of us. This is going to happen to everybody who's watching.
Yeah.
We have favorite music and favorite programming and favorite entertainment and favorite restaurants and favorite people. And you age and things change. And you have to adjust to it. There's no getting around it. We can't stick our fingers in the bricks and not fall down the well. The well is only this far down. All you have to do is let go and land on your feet, and you're fine. But you have to let go. And part of, I think, successful aging and staying in the business is a good corollary for staying in show business and keeping working. You have to change with the times. You have to develop yourself. You have to not have yourself in a little box and never get out of that box, because the parade is going to march past your box. It's better to get out of the box and join the parade. So, you know, I'm 500 years old and I'm still working. So here we are.
Thank you, Yoda. I appreciate that very much. You grew up in the New York area, so your keen remembrance of show business goes way back. Your activities within the business go way back. And I'm prefacing what we're going to get to by just saying that your world in which you grew up in, from the age of 9 or 10 years old, and you were doing TV commercials and acting, etc., also has helped you in every aspect of your life, whether you were an actor itself, a comedian, a writer for comedians, a producer, an author like you were for Lucy and for others,
and an incredible singer.
and yes, you are a singer. I forgot. I left that out. Harlan would be very angry if I left that out.
Harlan being my publicist.
Yes, and a very dear friend of mine. And Harlan, please feel better out there. He's not really feeling great these days. But everything that you have been involved in, as you have once said to me, everything that you've been involved in, Gary, in the business brings you to a point where it gives you depth of knowledge that you can pull from in order to move forward, such as a host of a talk show or something along those lines, which is now the last time you were on the show, we talked about how you put together a book and the things you put in, you put out. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we move on with this program as well, because I think it's interesting for people to kind of refresh their memory on that. But I want to talk about the talk show host that Geoffrey Mark is. Okay. And still is to this day.
My pleasure. Talking about me, my pleasure.
Absolutely. As if you don't have an ego like all the rest of us. You know, it's like you know.
Well, you know what?
Huh?
The first thing you just said, an important word. One cannot be a host, whether it's a talk show or a television show or you're giving a lecture, and not have confidence. If you don't have not an unhealthy ego, not a runaway train, but if you don't know, gosh darn it, I can do this and I can do it, gosh darn it, well, you're going to get nowhere.
Yeah.
One is going to get nowhere. And you know, and our friends don't know that my talk show host or variety show host career, outside of doing it live in nightclubs and in theaters and things, was because of dear, wonderful, the best there ever was, Gary Owens, who had me on his show many times and took me out to dinner one night. We were friends. We had dinners anyway, but he asked for the dinner. It was a little unusual, like Geoffrey Mark, I'd like to take you to dinner. Join me at Art's Deli. And let's, okay, fine.
But did he do it with his hand over his ear?
Again, for those of you who don't know, Gary Owens was the narrator or the announcer and an actor on a wonderful variety show called Rona Martin's Laugh-In. And he was mocking the old-time radio announcers who would put one finger in their ear, because you really can hear yourself better if you do this. Even as a singer, Ella used to do that. If she was like not sure she was in total pitch, she'd put, you just sort of close off one ear and you can hear yourself better in your head. So Gary was mocking that. But we had a wonderful Jewish deli dinner. And Gary said, young man, I think it's about time you had your own show. And he made it happen. I mean, it wasn't, I didn't have to do a pilot. I didn't have to audition. He got me the producer. And lo and behold, the Geoffrey Mark Show on KRLA in Los Angeles. And I did a 2-hour, once a week, old-fashioned radio variety show where I did a monologue, where we had guests, they played instruments, they sang, I sang. And if we were a little light on entertainment, we played some music, some recorded music. I loved it. I loved every second of doing it. I'm a ham. I love to entertain. I also love to make people happy. And from the fan mail we got, I made a lot of people happy. But putting it together, I knew I wanted it to be funny. I knew I wanted it, I must have music. And because I'm Geoffrey Mark, and because I've been doing this for so many years, you were kind not to mention how many, but I'm in my 51st year of show business. I was able to call on my friends, and I had some of the most spectacular people come on my show, and we just talked. If they had a product or a show they wanted to plug, but we just had conversations. And then people like Chuck McCann and Ron Carey would come up, do character work with me, and do bits and things, mostly spontaneous. When one is hosting a show, like Gary does so well, you have to be aware of the time. You've got a producer usually in your ear telling you stuff while you're talking. You have to make room for the commercials. You have to make room for this. You're running late. You're running short. Speed it up, slow it down. And you want to keep the people you're talking to engaged. And of course, all you lovely people out there want to keep you engaged, watching and listening. So it's not an easy job. People like Gary make it look easy, but it's hard work, but it's wonderful hard work. And if that phone rings again, I'm going to break legs.
I don't know who keeps calling me. I can't figure out who keeps calling me. Let me take a quick look. Go ahead, continue on. I'm just curious who keeps calling me.
I'll talk. So that was the Geoffrey Mark Show. The only problem I had was that KRLA back then was looking for mostly conservative but outrageous talk show hosts. You know, they wanted the Rush Limbaugh kind of people.
Yeah.
And I'm not politically conservative, although I have many friends who are. I am inclusive, but I'm also, I don't say things to be controversial. I just figure, let's see, I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I'm Jewish. I'm gay. I wear this stuff every time I leave my house.
Yeah.
Isn't that controversial enough already? I think,
I guess,
talking about the people I've known being the witness at John Lennon's assassination, a wonderful night spent with Freddie Mercury. Those kinds of stories from my life on their own generate enough controversy that I hope I'm interesting to people. I never, ever, ever want to bore anybody.
No.
And my natural sense of humor, I want to be funny. I want to make people laugh. And I bring that to the shows. It's very difficult. Like, Gary and I are close friends, but interviewing Geoffrey Mark is not easy because I like to talk and I get into performer mode. But being the host is different because one has to listen and not just, well, I'm going to ask these 7 questions. Well, no, listen to what the other person is saying, because if you have a good guest, forget the questions. Listen to what they're saying. They'll give you a good segue into something interesting. And if they're not a good guest, go back to the questions.
Yeah, that drives me crazy when you watch someone on like a news program and they're interviewing someone who's in their town, who's a celebrity of somewhat, whether it be a Meryl Streep or someone else, and they've got 5 questions for that 3 or 4 minute segment, and they don't bother to listen to what the answers were to the previous question. They just move on to the next question, and you don't know the juicy little gems that are in between, and it drives me crazy. It's like unprofessional. It's like, what did I say to you the other day on the television? I said, why, when Jimmy Carter passed away, why couldn't they have just said on every news outlet or every newspaper or anywhere else, former President Jimmy Carter has passed away? No, Jimmy Carter is dead.
I see what you mean. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the man passed away. He was in hospice for well over a year and before his wife passed away, and she's been gone almost 2 years. I didn't realize it was that long. But why? Where's the professionalism? When I was not learning, but when I was interning for Larry King and WIOD in Miami, he told me I was going to be a talk show host. I was playing music on the weekends for another station, for $5.25 an hour, 12 at night till 6 in the morning kind of thing. But he said, you're inquisitive and you listen and you're interested about a lot of things. Plus, having who your father and family are, you've traveled the world, you have things to bring to the table. And I think that's what, Geoffrey, you do. You bring those things to the table, which makes it interesting. If you have a talk show host who's never experienced life, which a lot of these podcast talk show hosts do, they haven't really experienced life. They ask the mundane, silly showbiz questions. I can't imagine how interesting they must be sitting around the house. I mean,
my answers to you would be, I would sound like, because I am an old man, because there is an art to broadcasting. It isn't just read the teleprompter or look at your paper and sensationalize everything you're saying. We have this, Donald Trump has a pimple. Everybody, you must tune in now because, no. When there were only 3 news networks and local stations doing their own news, journalism on television and radio, for the most part, was professional. Each of these news organizations pledged to tell you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, for real, not pretend. And that worked great until cable came along. Until now, there's 9 million places to get news electronically, and they want your attention. So the smallest little thing is blown way out of proportion to get your attention and keep you with them. And bigger things, more complicated things, more sophisticated things are sometimes given a short shrift because the people who are sitting there, who are very handsome or very pretty and look great and, are just, you just wish they would all take off their clothes. They're so gorgeous. But they don't know what they're doing. They don't understand the very topics they're discussing off of the teleprompter, which is a thing is on the camera that you can read pre-written things or a whole script if you want to. They don't know how to broadcast. They don't know how to, okay, this isn't what we planned, but this is what's happening. This is what we're going to talk about. The great broadcasters in news, Walter Cronkite is probably everybody's first favorite. Mine is probably Dan Rather, because he's such a wonderful man. I'm so happy to know him. What a wonderful, wonderful man. And Dan Rather was very kind to me at a very, can I tell us a fast story about Dan Rather? My little brother died about 3 months after his 18th birthday. Because of who I am, he wanted to go into show business also. So in New York, there is the Edward R. Murrow High School for people who want to go into radio and television broadcasting. He did well there. And the couple of strings pulled by Big Brother, he got into CBS Radio. And I'll just tell you, he had a car accident and it was over.
Yeah.
So I had to go to CBS to get his things. And the people there were all lined up, which shocked me. What my little brother didn't know was that he was about to be made the youngest producer in CBS radio history at 18 years old. And Dan Rather had 2 or 3 years earlier taken over the CBS evening news from Walter Cronkite, but he'd always done it in Walter's set. Well, they decided enough time had gone by, brand new, much bigger, much more expensive set for Dan. And Dan took me to the studio. He said, I was going to let David sit here, be the first one to sit in my chair and tell him that he was about to become the youngest producer in CBS history. Would you please sit in my chair for him? I cried. He cried. Roger Mudd cried. I mean, everybody who was at CBS at that moment in time who wasn't on the air was there to greet me. And we're still in touch. I just he's an amazing.
I'd love to have him on the program. I would. And by the way, there's a Roger Mudd connection with me, with Roger Mudd. He would teach at GW, where I went when I was in the Air Force in Washington, D.C., for those of you who don't know, George Washington University. And he would teach some journalism classes from time to time. And I was very fortunate enough to get in to one of his classes. And one night, it was an afternoon going into early evening kind of a class, and the class was running long, but everybody loved Roger Mudd. He was just fascinating. And one night after class, I dropped down into the well where he was. It was an auditorium seating, folks, and down in the bottom of where the desk is, it's called the well, like it would be in a courtroom. And I said to him, I said, Mr. Mudd, you and I have something in common. And he said, what is that? I said, well, I have no proof of what I'm about to tell you. I'm just told, this is the story, that my mother's side of the family is related to John Wilkes Booth. And I know who your great-grandfather was, Dr. Mudd, who supposedly worked on John Wilkes Booth. I said, so somewhere along the line, I guess we have that kind of a crazy connection. And he said, he looked at me and with that deep voice of his, and he said, well, John survived, and you'll probably survive my class, and that was it. We had lunch together one time many years later, and he was such a gracious gentleman. And broadcasters like that, they don't come along anymore. They honestly really don't, and it's quite a shame.
Well, where would they learn how to do that these days? Because there is so little local programming any longer.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's good or bad. It just is.
Yeah.
That the places to be bad. George Burns said this 50 years ago. Where are the new comedians and singers and acrobats going to come from? There's no place any longer to go and be bad and then learn and get good.
Yeah.
Well, for journalists, unless you're someone like David Letterman, who watched everybody and learned and soaked up, because there's pieces of Steve Allen and Johnny Carson and Jack Parr and other broadcasters in David Letterman.
Yeah.
That's how it worked for me. To get back to me for half a second, I was a sponge. I'm good at what I do because I saw the very best do it,
Hmm.
and then I took from them tools of the trade, professionalism, and then I mixed it up. I made it Geoffrey Mark. I wasn't copying anybody. I was taking what I'd learned and making something new out of it for another audience, and I'm grateful that I can do that. I love what I do. And I have been doing this, like I said, it's my 51st year. I'm doing this a very long time.
Geoffrey Mark is our guest here on Mainstream. Gary Allen with you as we begin the new year. Geoffrey's always with me at the first of the year. He is a Hollywood historian, show business. If it doesn't exist, if he's never heard of it, it never existed to begin with. He's an author, a writer, actor. He is just a multi-talented dynamo in the show business world, and he's one of my dearest friends in the whole wide world. When I was growing up, we had a gentleman in South Florida back when there was only like 3 stations, actually 2. ABC hadn't even come along yet in the middle 60s yet to any prominence. We had a gentleman named Ralph Rennick, who was the consummate professional. He instituted and came up with a lot of different things for cameramen out in the field and for reporters and everything, but he always insisted on professionalism. And there was another woman who eventually worked for the ABC affiliate in Miami, that when I was at the University of Miami, I wrote a paper, and part of the paper was interviewing other journalists in the business. And I went to interview Ann Bishop. And Ann was a real hard nose news person.
Yeah, I'm familiar with her. Yes.
And we talked and we talked and we joked, and they knew who my uncle was. That's how I got in the front door with Larry King to begin with. And that's how I got in to do these interviews. But she said to me, she said, well, how come you're not following in his footsteps to be a comedian? I said, well, in reality, I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps and be an airline pilot, but it just didn't work out. She said, yes, it didn't. She said, but you have a career in this business. I can tell you, you know how to ask the right questions. And then for some strange, stupid reason, Geoffrey, when I left Miami and I went to LA, I pursued the acting instead of trying to get any silly job at any radio station there, just to get myself in the door and start working myself up. Don't ask me why I did what I did. It's the only person I've ever outsmarted in my entire life is me, I mean, but Ralph Rennick set the standard for broadcasters in South Florida, and anybody that ever worked with him or Ann Bishop, and there are others now, younger ones and Craig Stevens, who was at Channel 7, they learn what it's like to come up the hard way, and that the big money isn't there. And that's the surprising thing. Everybody thinks there's such this big, gigantic money in being a broadcaster, a podcaster, or a talk show host. Well, at one time, yes, not anymore.
Because at one time, if you were on a network news show, the 7 o'clock news, right? Or the 11 o'clock news nationally.
Yeah.
Probably made a couple $100,000, which was huge. That's like making a couple million today. But you reach 20 million people doing that.
Yeah.
Our biggest hit shows today on broadcast television. If 2 million people are watching, they're thrilled. It's changed. And if you don't have that kind of reach, you don't get paid that kind of money. And they're not interested in experience. So the minute you get crow's feet, out you go. Yeah. And they put in some young stud who can spell cat, but it might be with a K. I have a wonderful joke, but I cannot tell. But it's very similar to that joke, but it's naughty. And I know you don't do naughty things on your channel here.
Well, how do you know? I mean, you don't know when the cameras are off, what I do.
Yes, I do, as a matter of fact.
Well, never mind. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
But so the experience is different. The opportunities are different. Radio. What we in the business call terrestrial radio, meaning radio that goes through the airwaves and you pick up with a radio. or on your phone or however you get it these days,
Yeah.
is dying. It's
Yeah.
become sports, some talk, some music, but in every large city, the stations are closing down or they're firing all of their employees and it's all automated by a computer. There's no human being there.
Yeah.
You know, there is no one, how old am I, putting a needle on a record or shoving in a cassette, which we used to do, you know, to
Yeah.
run stuff and make sounds and noises. There's nobody there anymore.
No, there's not.
And as we continue to age and as things begin to change, I prognosticate that CBS, NBC, ABC, and the Fox Entertainment Network, they're all
Yeah.
going to go away. They're going to have some sort of a platform where you can see their programming, but over the air broadcasting is going to go away. And so will radio. It's all going to be electronic. It's all going to be, you have to have a tablet, a smart TV, a computer, a phone, an iPhone to get entertained.
You think AI is the culprit here at the bottom line?
Greed is the culprit here. Because
Follow the money, yeah.
AI, the language I would like to use. AI can suck a rotten egg as far as I'm concerned. Because if you're a writer, you don't need AI to write for you.
No.
If you're looking for an announcer, hire someone like my buddy Randy West.
Yes.
Don't use AI. And there's a voice you can get for free practically, but they don't know what to emphasize. I see so many documentaries now that are narrated by an AI voice, and they take pauses in the wrong places, and they sometimes mispronounce words. You know, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz.
Yeah.
Well, a real person would have been correct. They would have retaken it. And not only is it AI and it's not good broadcasting, but the people producing these things aren't even stopping to fix it.
And you know something? That's what I love about Ken Burns and Peter Coyote, who have been collaborating for years, and all the other actors that he has on. They're professionals.
Yes.
You know, they're professionals. I want to get back to one thing that one person wanted me to ask you.
Sure.
And when you're putting together the podcast about Ella,
right,
or any other podcast, and it's music, very much like when you were writing the book about Ella or Lucy or Ethel Merman or any of the other books that you have written over the years, which, by the way, Geoffrey's writing a biography on me. It'll be about 10 pages long, and it'll just have, don't worry about it, he'll get over it. And that'll be
it'll
pretty
be
much
a very, very, very long description of his penis. That's the entire book.
Being the Greek boy that I am with a Jewish accent on. When you're putting together, you got it. Okay. When you're putting together a show on Ella, whether it's a theme show about Ella, something to celebrate maybe the people that she's sung with over the years, like Frank and Sammy and Dean, and worked with Duke Ellington and Count Basie, et cetera, et cetera. I know you go through the ebb and flow of a show. That's the way music shows go. They go up and down, up and down. They take you through a roller coaster ride, which is what they're supposed to do. Where do you begin and what do you select? Because her catalog is so vast and such a superbly talented woman.
Ella is the most recorded female voice in history outside of opera. And with my show, because there has to be some sort of glue that holds it together. This is not just, well, I'm playing Ella Fitzgerald music for an hour and, you know, tune in, don't tune in. It's always on a theme. And sometimes I got to, you know, scratch my red head to find a good theme because I have to be inspired. If I don't look forward to making that theme, I shouldn't use it. Because my enthusiasm for her and the music and the backstage stories
won't be there.
There has to be there.
Yeah.
So what I do is I pick the topic first. Ella and Count Basie. Well, all right, Geoffrey Mark. You know they made 2 studio albums together complete. You know they made 2 other studio albums where she was a guest artist for a song. And then you know they did some live albums together. Well, all right, let's just do the live albums, or let's just do the 2 studio albums. Let's narrow it down. And then I, from memory, know the catalog and go, all right, if I have an hour-long show, every 15 minutes, I want to do 2 songs to give me a chance to tell you and share with you my passion, why these songs were chosen, what happened in the recording studio that day, or why these became famous, or Ella didn't like this, but look how whatever the stories are.
Yeah.
Because I've talked to all the arrangers and all the producers. I know this catalog like the back of my hand. And then I choose the songs, but I sequence them. I don't just, okay, these two. No, how would this flow? And the question with Ella always is, if Ella was sitting next to me, how would she routine the songs? And the reason I know that so well, as you well know, our friends out there might not know, is towards the end of her life, I was choosing them for her. So I know what an Ella Fitzgerald concert, the ebbs and the flows of it. And that's how I make the show. And then I have absolutely no script. I introduce the show, I explain who we are and what we're doing, like you do with your show in the beginning. The first song plays, and then I just share from my heart what I want the folks out there, they're all my friends because they love Ella too.
Yes.
What I want to share with them. And if we go long, then the producer has to do some editing. I've done this show 2 different ways, by the way. One is like you have your very wonderful producer who I'm very impressed with. And
Tommy, yes.
Yeah. And so Tommy's like with us right now.
Yes.
And then when we're finished, Tommy will turn this into what will be broadcast. I've done it where my producer was sitting with me electronically as I was recording the show. And he'd make, Jeff, that word, you mispronounced it or didn't come across right or however, let's do it again. With the producer I've been working with up till now, I do it all myself. I send it to him and then he edits it after the fact. I think I prefer the first way better because I've got someone watching my back and I know what the bottom line is going to look like. And
well, there's nobody better at it than Tommy. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, Tommy and I think are going to be working together very soon. So I look forward to that because he's special. Yay, Tommy. Woof, 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 woof.
Yeah, he's a San Diego Charger fan. So,
Oh, I don't care. Anyway, I care about Tommy.
No, I love him. And listen, let me tell you something. He's a veteran, by the way. I just want to say that.
Thank you for your service, sir.
Tommy is one of the nicest gentlemen you'll ever want to meet. Just don't get on the wrong side of him about the Chargers or the Dolphins or any other teams that he loves. Now, we both love the Hurricanes, but he's one of the kindest, nicest gentlemen in the world, and he is he's grand to be around. He really is a grand gentleman.
I understand the game of football.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, I'm not ignorant about it. And if Tommy and I were sitting in a room together watching a football game and he was enthusiastic, I'd be enthusiastic with him. Yeah, but if Geoffrey Mark puts on a sports event by himself, after about 6 minutes, my mind begins to wander to the million other things I'm thinking always at the same moment. And then I realize that that 10 or 15 minutes has gone by. I have no idea what's going on. I've lost my enthusiasm. Click.
Yep.
So I'll never annoy Tommy because I have no favorites and no preferences. I have a place in my heart for the New York Mets. Other than that,
yeah,
yay, whatever your team is, yay.
Let's get back to the podcasting for a minute.
Sure.
Who are at this moment and who were your favorite broadcasters that you took something from them?
Well, certainly Gary Owens.
Yes.
Gary did something amazing to me. in that while he could do live radio, and sometimes he did because I was on his shows live,
Yeah.
more often his things were pre-recorded. And he did music shows where he didn't listen to the music, but he could do, 7 of them in 45 minutes because he just recorded the in-betweens and his were written. He didn't spontaneously talk from the heart. He wrote himself a script because timing. He had this much time to say what he had to say. So I learned from that. Certainly growing up in New York City, William B. Williams on the late lamented WNEW AM radio.
Yeah.
How could you not learn from a man like that? And there are people, no offense to this man, like Jonathan Schwartz, who I didn't think was very good at broadcasting. And there are reasons why I think he wasn't good at them. And I try to avoid those things. So I learned from him anyway. See, you can listen to someone who's not very good and figure out why they're not good. And then avoid those pitfalls when you're working. It's the same thing with music. There is no absolute 100% original. All of us are influenced by the music that came before. So I've got, as a singer, tons of people who have influenced me. But if you hear me sing in a nightclub or do a concert, it's Geoffrey Mark. I'm not imitating. I may insinuate, when I scat sing, Ella Fitzgerald, Mel Torme. Well, yeah, because why not? Who else am I going to learn from but the best? It's the same thing with the broadcasting. There were wonderful, wonderful people in New York City. I was so lucky to be brought up there.
Yeah.
Who did the Williams B. Williams kind of broadcasting, personality broadcasting, where they talked as much as they played music. And then there were people like, bless his heart, Cousin Brucey and other New York, Don Imus.
Yeah.
I don't imitate them, but I appreciate the talent they had. My friend Steve Allen did lots and lots of radio shows. I learned an awful lot from Steve.
Yeah.
Steve Allen is probably, if I had to pick somebody in show business, like, who are you most like? Probably Steve. Yeah. Because like myself, he was an actor. He was a comedian. He was a singer. He was a composer. He was a radio host. He was a television host. He wrote Broadway shows. He wrote scores of movies. He did all this stuff. And it is one of the great sadnesses of my life. The last time I saw Steve, I was visiting with him in his office. And he said, "Jeff, you write lyrics, don't you?" I said, "But how did you know?" But yes, I do. I'm an ASCAP, which is a place where if you're a professional songwriter, your music goes to get copyrighted. And he said, "Jeff, I've got 100 tunes I've written that have no lyrics. Why don't you let me send them to you? Pick out the 10 or 12 you really like. And why don't you write some lyrics? Let's make an album together." And 4 days later, he passed away. And I called Jane Meadows, his wife, with an appropriate time gone by. And I mentioned all this to her. She said, "Geoffrey, I can't." She said, "I don't know which 100 he would have sent you. And I don't know if he would have liked your lyrics or not. I can't judge that." So that opportunity, unfortunately, passed away literally.
Yeah.
But what an honor to be asked.
He was, he would come to the Improv every so often. And sometimes he would bring Jane and sometimes he wouldn't bring Jane. And if I or Howard Allen were emceeing at the Improv, he would always come in and he'd look at Bud and he'd go, "Are any one of my sons here tonight?" Because, and of course, Howard and I both spelled our names different than Mr. Allen. And he was always gracious with me, always gracious. And he was always gracious with Howard and everybody else. And he was just a funny, nice, cultured man.
Yes, he was a Renaissance man, and I have been called that, and I'm very grateful that I am. I never, I spent hours and hours and hours with Steve. We talked about everything.
Yeah.
Not my personal life, but definitely his, which surprised me. And he could look at a show or a performance and tell you what was good about it or bad about it. But the only bad blood he had, or like a person he just did not like, of all people, he had great antipathy for Audrey Meadows, his wife's sister. Um, Partly because he felt Audrey took vows for things that actually Jane had done, partly because Audrey took Ethel Merman's husband away from her and married him, because the Allens were very close friends with Merman. And even talking to their children, it's like, yeah, one day he's, this guy, and the next day he's Uncle Bob, and we didn't know how to deal with him, and we loved Ethel, and we didn't know what to do. We were children, they said. But other than that, I never heard Steve talk about anyone or anything or any performance or piece of music badly. He would explain what he thought the good points were and why it didn't work, but not with any animosity. I never saw him be mean or jealous or anything like that.
No, because he grew up in a time when, yeah, he could have maybe been that way, but his mother, who was in the business forever in the day,
El Montrose,
brought him up different than that. And, it's like you and I were talking the other day about RJ, Robert Wagner. He's a gentleman. There are people like that still in the business and aren't willing to rob you blind. But we've got about 10 minutes ago. My guest has been Geoffrey Mark on this program of Main Street. Always pleasure to have him on. He's going to be back on again tomorrow. I'm going to call him and we're going to book for February or March to make sure that he's on to talk about Ella Fitzgerald. But there's one question I've always wanted to ask about Ella, and I hope it's and then I have a couple more for you. What drew people to her besides her enormous talent, her enormous giving part of Ella? What drew people to her that they said, I want to work with that woman? I will forget the talent. The way she does it. Is it just the overall who she was that drew people to her?
It's a good question. And I have to include the talent here. I'm sorry to change your question.
Yeah.
Because she was the best at what she did, her contemporaries, other singers who came from the big band era and then continued to have careers when big band was no longer the music of a young generation, they watched her explode. from ragamuffin, living with prostitutes, teenager, and 3 years later she had the biggest hit in the country on a song. And then they saw her mature, not just the same talent, but watched Ella grow and grow, and everything Ella did got bigger. I don't mean bigger sound, but her she allowed her talent to keep growing. She was always learning. She was always reinventing herself a little bit. We've spoken before, but she didn't sing the same act all the time. She never wanted to be bored. She didn't want the audience to get bored. But I think there was a love affair between Ella and the Spotlight. The Spotlight loved her. The audiences loved her. Ella loved the audiences even more. Yeah. And it showed. It showed. When you went to see Ella sing, she radiated love. Like, I am here to make you happy. Let's be happy together.
Yeah.
That's very hard to resist.
Yes. And I think the good entertainers do that. I think the good entertainers grow as time moves forward. They learn from here. They go, well, 10 years ago, I was here. Now I'm here because I've grown. I've expanded my instrument, my voice, my whatever. I think that's so important because when audiences pay good money to go and see someone perform, they want to be thoroughly entertained. And I've heard it from Tom Jones. I've heard it from Engelbert, Michael Bublé, you name it. I've heard from all of them. Those people are paying good money to come and see me, and I'm going to make them walk out smiling and happy that they came to be entertained, to forget about all the peripheral stuff in their life for a while.
The best advice. No, I'll take it back. Second best advice. Second best advice I've ever been given in show business came from the wife of a man I was very close to, Bob Schiller, one of the original I Love Lucy writers. His wife intensely disliked me. But for some reason, We were at a California State Democratic Party fundraiser, and they asked me to be their guest. And she said, Geoffrey, let's take a walk. And she said, first of all, you've made us proud. We can take you anywhere you'll fit in, and you're a gentleman. Thank you for that. This is from a person who didn't like me. And then she said, Geoffrey, you want to have a long career? You have to continuously reinvent yourself. Wear different hats, making the joke about my sparkly hats, that you're going to have to tap into all your different talents and experiences, because you're going to find a day when you can't sell a book, sing a song. If you can't book a song, tell a joke. You can't tell a joke, write a script. If you can't write a script, go back to the book. Host a show. She said, use everything you've ever seen, heard, listened to, watched, ingested. If you use all of that, you will have a long career. And she was right.
Yeah.
The best
Versatility.
The best advice, of course, came from Rip Taylor, who was the father of my sparkles, sequins, and jewelry.
Yes.
Then he was the one, for those of you who don't know the story, who came to see me perform in Los Angeles decades ago and said, let's go to dinner. He said, Geoffrey, you're magic on the stage. And I'll clean this up a little bit. But you dress like a blankety blank accountant. You need sparkles. You need to shine in costume the way your talent and your soul shine. And I found out later that was the same advice Liberace had given him.
Yeah.
He was passing it down to me from Liberace. And then Kay Ballard said, wear sparkly scarves. And Carol Channing said, wear your diamonds, honey. You can carry that off.
Yeah.
And the help of a lot of people, because nobody does it in this business successfully all by themselves.
That's true. In the few minutes we have left.
Yes, sir.
The question that I love to ask people, and I ask it in various ways. When it's all said and done, who's Geoffrey Mark?
A giver of light for people who are in darkness. A man who spread love. A man who showed how to be a gentleman and how to be a good human being. And he did that by all the talents he had.
Yeah.
And, I've said this to you before privately. I don't know if I've said it on the air. I was born with a genius IQ. My IQ is 163. I was born with all these talents. Even at my age, I'm a handsome man. But those are all gifts I was born with. I did nothing to deserve them. But I can take a bow for what I've done with them.
Well, I can certainly atone to the fact that you are one of the nicest gentlemen and friends that I've had in my life. And it's too bad we never met when I lived in LA, because it would have been a real good friendship, and I would be so much more full in my life knowing you for even a longer period of time. It has been nothing but a joy to have you in my life as my friend, advisor, because I've learned from you, as you know. And it is always a pleasure to have you on this program. Don't go anywhere when we get through here, because I want to book you as soon as possible.
And that was costing me $1,000 or $2,000. I forgot the amount for you to say all those nice things.
I think we worked on a pro bono basis, and unfortunately he died, so we don't have to worry about any of that.
Unfortunately, 6 more jokes came to my head, and I cannot say any of them. But I'm
exactly. Anyway, Geoffrey Mark, historian, friend, author, great gentleman. Thank you so much for joining us here on Main Street on this episode.
Radio. God bless everybody, and have a happy.
And I want to thank all of you out there for taking the time to watch this particular program. We hope you'll enjoy it. There's more to come, some good news coming down the road. And until we meet again, would you please take care of yourself, and please take care of each other. Bye for now.
This is Main Street.
Is Tommy still with us?
Yeah. All right. What is March? What is March? What?
February is Black History Month.
Mm-hmm.
March is Women's History Month, and
Okay.
April is